Imagine waking up with no shelter, no food, no fire. That was every single morning for our ancient ancestors. The sun has set and darkness swallows everything around you. You huddle closer to the flames crackling orange before you. Thick white smoke curls directly and brutally into your face. Your eyes water, your throat burns, your lungs protest loudly. But you do not move, because the fire means survival. This is 50,000 BC, and comfort does not exist yet. And somewhere in that smoky darkness, something extraordinary is happening. One ancestor inhales deeply and feels something shift inside them. Not pain, not nausea, not the burning they expected tonight. Something else entirely. Something warm, something loose, something deeply pleasant. They look around the fire with wide and wondering prehistoric eyes. They do not have words for what just happened to them, but their brain remembers it, files it, stores it carefully away. And that single accidental moment may have changed human history forever. This is the true origin story of smoking on Earth. Not tobacco, not cigars, not the colonial trade routes later. The very first time a human inhaled something burning deliberately, and why that impulse may be older than civilization itself. Here is the thing almost nobody actually tells you first. Smoking does not begin with tobacco, and never actually did. It does not begin with Native American ceremony or agriculture. It does not begin with any crop humans ever planted. The desire to inhale smoke may be hardwired into us, hardwired on a level that predates every city ever built, predates every written language, every religion, every law ever made. The evidence sitting behind this claim is genuinely and completely staggering. So let us go all the way back to fire, because without fire, none of what follows ever happens at all. Fire has been part of the human story for millennia. The oldest confirmed evidence of controlled fire dates back far, 1 million years ago at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Archaeologists uncovered burnt plant ash and charred animal bone fragments. This was not the aftermath of a wildfire burning through. This was a sustained, deliberate, contained fire burning inside rock. 1 million years ago, we were not even Homo sapiens. That was Homo erectus, our heavier-browed and earlier evolutionary cousin. Smaller brain, thicker skull, and absolutely no one telling them anything. But they sat around fires exactly the same way we do. They cooked meat on those flames and stayed warm nightly. They huddled together in the darkness and they breathed smoke. Every single day for hundreds of thousands of unrecorded years. Every human and pre-human ancestor near fire inhaled its smoke. It was not a choice, it was simply prehistoric atmospheric reality. Nobody had an app to check the ancient air quality. Nobody filed complaints about the smoke drifting into the cave. You breathed it because the fire was keeping you alive. And slowly, quietly, without anyone noticing, something else was happening. Some of that smoke was doing something to their minds. Because not all smoke is created equal, not even close. When organic matter burns, it does not just release steam, it releases a complex cocktail of compounds into the surrounding air. Some plants, when combusted, release genuinely psychoactive chemical substances outward. Alkaloids, terpene compounds, molecules that interact with the human nervous system in ways that are, to put it plainly, very noticeable. In other words, some ancestors were accidentally getting high nightly, sitting around a campfire with absolutely no idea why whatsoever, feeling warm and strange and wonderful and not knowing the reason. This is not a fringe theory buried in obscure academic papers. Researchers have proposed for decades that early forest-dwelling humans existed. They were regularly exposed to smoke from psychoactive plants burning.
Cannabis, Nicotiana species, various entheogens growing wild across every continent. Plants that when they burn change what the brain does. And here is the part that genuinely makes your mind stop. The human brain already has receptors that respond to cannabinoids. These receptors did not evolve because of cannabis plants specifically. They are part of our endocannabinoid system, regulating mood and memory. But when that first human inhaled cannabis smoke accidentally by fire, their brain did not panic. It simply said, "Hello," warmly. That first accidental hit of psychoactive smoke around a campfire may be the true and deepest origin of smoking on Earth. Not a decision, not a plan, not an intentional human act, just a very pleasant accident repeated enough times to become habit, and then deliberate, and then ritualized, and then passed carefully down. Think about the scale of what that single moment represents now. The entire multi-trillion-dollar global tobacco industry rests on that fire. Centuries of ritual, shamanic tradition, medicine, ceremony, all built from smoke. All of it may have started because someone sat downwind accidentally of the wrong burning bush and had an unexpectedly spectacular evening. History is sometimes beautiful in the most completely absurd ways imaginable. Now we must be careful and honest about the actual timelines. Ancient humans breathing psychoactive smoke and intentionally cultivating it are different, very, very different claims, and the archaeology reflects that important gap. Let us talk about what the physical evidence actually tells us. The oldest direct evidence of intentional cannabis use ever discovered comes from a burial site deep in the Pamir Mountains, Central Asia, dating to approximately 500 BC, roughly 2,500 years ago. Excavators found wooden braziers containing stones that had been superheated, alongside residue from cannabis plants with unusually and deliberately high THC. This was not wild cannabis harvested for rope or fiber. This was cultivated, selected, and placed in a ritual burial. Someone chose it, prepared it, and burned it with intention, and they did it in the context of honoring their dead. That detail matters enormously because it tells us something profound and true. By 500 BC, smoke was already sacred, already ceremonial, already meaningful. But here is the question that should be sitting with you. Does the absence of older physical evidence mean nothing happened earlier, or does it simply mean we have not found it yet? Because organic material almost never survives thousands of years underground intact. We find stone tools from 3 million years ago because stone survives, but a wooden pipe packed with dried herbs disappears in centuries. A leather pouch of cannabis dissolves back into the earth quietly, long before any archaeologist ever shows up with careful excavation tools. The absence of evidence in this specific case is not conclusive. It is an absence of survival, not an absence of behavior. And then there is what historians call the Herodotus problem entirely. Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, wrote in the 5th century BC. He described the Scythians, fierce nomadic people of the Eurasian steppe, performing something he called a vapor bath after their burial ceremonies. They set up small enclosed felt tents and heated stones glowing. Then they threw hemp seeds directly onto those superheated stones inside. Then they sat in the tent and inhaled everything rising upward, and as Herodotus wrote with careful detail, they howled with pleasure. For centuries, historians dismissed this as Greek exaggeration and misunderstanding. Then archaeologists began excavating Scythian burial mounds across the steppe carefully, and they found exactly what Herodotus had described in precise detail: bronze braziers, superheated stones, and unmistakable hemp residue together inside. The man was not embellishing a single word of his account.
He was simply reporting what he had witnessed with his own eyes. Now let us talk about tobacco specifically, because most people ask. Tobacco is a plant in the genus Nicotiana, native to Americas. That geographic origin matters enormously for understanding the entire historical picture. Tobacco was completely unknown to Europe, Africa, and Asia until contact, until European ships arrived on American shores in the late 1400s. When Columbus landed in the Caribbean in 1492, he noticed something: indigenous people walking with small glowing sticks pressed between their fingers, inhaling smoke from burning dried leaves and exhaling it through noses. His crew was completely baffled by what they were witnessing daily. His crew also tried it themselves within weeks, because of course they did. But tobacco use in the Americas is far older than Columbus. Chemical residues from ancient pipes have been found and carefully dated, back at least 3,500 years ago in the southeastern United States. Some researchers believe tobacco cultivation could reach back 10,000 years further, tied directly to the earliest development of agriculture in the Amazon. And here is the crucial thing about tobacco in ancient America. It was not recreational, not primarily, not in any dominant sense. It was sacred in ways that modern minds struggle to fully grasp. Tobacco was used in healing rituals and communication with spirit worlds. It was used to bind solemn agreements between neighboring tribes forever. Blowing smoke on another person was a profound act of blessing. A shaman who smoked was not taking a casual cigarette break. He was opening a channel between the living and the divine. The smoke itself was considered a living, breathing, traveling sacred messenger, carrying prayers upward toward the sky and bringing visions downward here. That framing explains why tobacco use was so disciplined in ceremony, why it was controlled, ritualized, and treated with absolute deep reverence. When something is genuinely sacred, you do not abuse or waste it. You do not chain smoke it while staring at a screen. The casual daily habit is an almost entirely European invention later. Now, let us go back even further than any of this, back to a discovery that most people have never once heard. In 2019, researchers made a genuinely remarkable find in Utah desert. At a site in the Great Salt Lake Desert they dug, they found a hearth, a fire, roughly 12,000 years old exactly. Inside that ancient hearth were seeds of Nicotiana attenuata, wild tobacco. These were not seeds that had accidentally blown into the flames. They were concentrated, deliberately placed, present in unmistakable intentional quantities. This site predates any known pottery or pipe artifacts by millennia, and it pushed the timeline of tobacco use back dramatically and permanently. If people were throwing tobacco seeds into fires 12,000 years ago, whether to inhale the smoke or for pure ritual purposes entirely, then what were humans in Africa and Asia doing simultaneously then? Because 12,000 years ago, humans were already living absolutely everywhere on Earth. They were in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in Australia already. And the human desire to alter consciousness is not American in origin. It is not tied to one continent, one culture, one tradition. It is a human phenomenon, universal, ancient, and deeply persistent across time. Let me introduce you to something that might sound wild initially, but is taken with complete seriousness by respected anthropologists worldwide today: the intoxication hypothesis, and it changes how you see our species. The argument goes like this, and it is difficult to dismiss.
Across virtually every human culture ever documented in all of history, people have sought out ways to deliberately alter their own consciousness. Fermented beverages, psychedelic mushrooms, smoked herbs, chewed leaves, swallowed seeds.
This behavior is universal, persistent, and independently developed across every culture. Ronald Siegel, a psychopharmacologist at UCLA, proposed this in the 1980s. The pursuit of intoxication is a fourth biological drive in animals, sitting alongside hunger, thirst, and sex as something deeply embedded biologically. And it is not just humans who exhibit this ancient drive. Elephants deliberately seek out fermented marula fruit and consume it eagerly. Reindeer in Siberia eat Amanita muscaria mushrooms with apparent deliberate intention. They then drink the urine of other reindeer who ate first because the psychoactive compounds pass through the body largely still intact. Reindeer conducting drug recycling operations in Siberia, and honestly, full respect. The point is that if this drive is this ancient and deep, then early humans, long before pottery, long before agriculture, long before writing, were deliberately exposing themselves to psychoactive smoke around their ancient fires, because they had learned through hard experience that it changed something in the mind worth seeking out again and again. Maybe they burned those specific plants intentionally during important group rituals. Maybe they selected their campsites near specific psychoactive plants for reasons. Maybe they learned which smoke made you feel good and transcendent, and which smoke made you feel like your body was ending. With some plants, that distinction is one you only learn once. This is trial and error operating at genuinely prehistoric and lethal stakes. But the ones who survived remembered, and they told everyone around them. They passed it down through generations of knowledge, never written down, but lived in the body, in the memory around the fire. That is how most human knowledge worked for most of history. Not libraries, not universities, not written texts archived safely for posterity. Lived experience passed mouth to ear in the darkness after dark. Now let us talk about something that almost never comes up. Smoking as medicine, and it may have been medicine first, always. Long before smoking was recreational, and long before it became spiritual, it may have begun as the most practical intervention humans had. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents ever found, dates to ancient Egypt around 1550 BC and describes something startling. Treatments involving the deliberate inhalation of smoke from carefully heated herbs, specifically prescribed for conditions affecting the throat and the fragile lungs. Yes, ancient Egyptians treated lung conditions by having patients inhale smoke. That seems insane from a modern medical perspective, and we understand. But the specific herbs they used, including henbane and various aromatics, have genuine documented pharmacological properties when absorbed through the human lungs. The ancient Greeks used fumigation, therapeutic smoke, as regular medical practice. Hippocrates himself, the founder of Western medicine, wrote about herbal vapor inhalation, prescribed for diseases of the lungs and various other serious conditions. The logic was not entirely unreasonable given what they understood then. Smoke reaches the lungs directly and immediately, bypassing the digestive system. If a plant has medicinal properties, smoke delivers them fast and efficiently. We still operate on this exact same principle in modern medicine. Asthma inhalers, anesthetic gases, and nebulizers all use this ancient logic. The delivery mechanism that ancient Egyptians pioneered survived into the future. The burning part, thankfully, has largely been refined away over time. Ancient Indian Ayurvedic medicine, over 3,000 years old, describes something similar, a practice called dhumapana, meaning the drinking of medicinal sacred smoke, involving deliberate inhalation of specific medicinal herbs through carved ancient pipes.
The texts describe particular plants, specific conditions, detailed preparation protocols throughout. This was not improvised or casual. It was a sophisticated medical system, with centuries of careful refinement and detailed observation behind every prescription. Across ancient China, ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Greece, and ancient India simultaneously, in virtually every early civilization on record across every populated continent, there is documented evidence of people inhaling smoke for therapeutic purposes, as a recognized, systematized, and respected formal medical practice in society. Not because they were addicted, not because they thought it fashionable, because within the limits of their knowledge and available tools, it worked. Or at least, it worked enough times that they kept prescribing it. And in a world with no antibiotics, no surgery, no hospitals, work sometimes was a meaningful and genuinely life-saving bar to meet. That context is everything when we judge what they did then. There is another angle to this story that deserves serious attention. Smoking and shared smoke may have been one of humanity's earliest social technologies. Humans are deeply and fundamentally social animals who evolved in groups. Group cohesion, the ability of people to trust and act together, was literally a matter of survival and death for our ancestors. Isolated individuals died in the prehistoric world. Groups lived and thrived. Anything that enhanced social bonding had genuine and direct survival value. And shared rituals, including shared consumption of psychoactive substances together, are extraordinarily powerful mechanisms for building deep and lasting social cohesion. When people undergo a shared altered experience together, something profound happens. A sense of connection forms that is very hard to replicate otherwise. Modern neuroscience has confirmed this with measurable and documented experimental results. Shared rituals synchronize neural activity, increase trust, and deepen group identity. So when ancient humans sat together breathing smoke from burning cannabis and collectively entered an altered state inside an enclosed and dark space, that was not simply recreational behavior that happened to be communal. That was social technology functioning at the highest level of effectiveness. That was how you built the deep trust necessary for survival. The trust that let you go into genuinely dangerous situations together and come back alive on the other side, together, bonded permanently. The ritual smoke circle was not just a gathering or a party. It was infrastructure. It was the social glue of prehistoric human life. And now we arrive at what might be the most uncomfortable part. The transition from sacred smoke to casual habit is a disaster. When tobacco arrived in Europe in the 16th century, something broke. It spread with a speed that should feel very familiar to us. Within decades, smoking had shifted from exotic curiosity to continental obsession. By the 1600s, tobacco was being actively traded across the entire globe. By the 1700s, powdered snuff was fashionable among European aristocracy widely. By the early 1900s, the industrially manufactured cigarette had arrived permanently. What took indigenous Americans thousands of years to carefully and reverently build, a measured, ritualistic, deeply spiritual, and culturally embedded practice around smoke, was dismantled and replaced within 4 short centuries by European industrialists entirely. Turned into a mass-market consumer product optimized purely for profit. And then the tobacco industry did something that still staggers the conscience. They spent decades and billions of dollars suppressing their own internal evidence their own scientists had compiled showing cigarettes caused cancer directly. They marketed cigarettes specifically to children through calculated and deliberate campaigns. They hired doctors to publicly endorse their products for credibility and trust. They added chemical compounds specifically designed to make nicotine hit faster, to make it leave the body faster, maximizing the cycle of addiction. They engineered something ancient and communal and sacred into a destruction machine. A shaman in 500 BC placing cannabis on hot ritual stones, and a tobacco executive in 1960 marketing cigarettes to children deliberately. Both worked with smoke, both worked with plants, both worked with fire. Almost nothing else about those two human beings was remotely the same. The distance between them is not just centuries, it is moral chasms. One was building something sacred that served the community around him. One was dismantling something sacred to extract profit from human addiction. History does not always move forward. Sometimes it moves in the wrong direction entirely. So when exactly did ancient humans first start smoking intentionally and deliberately? The honest answer is that we do not know with precision. Physical evidence takes us back 12,000 years with reasonable archaeological confidence. Speculation, grounded in behavioral evidence, takes us back considerably and plausibly further. The underlying drive, the desire to alter consciousness and share ritual, is almost certainly far older than any artifact ever pulled from ground. It may be as old as fire itself burning in caves. It may be as old as the cognitive leap that made us human, the ability to connect cause and effect across time and experience, to look at a burning plant and think, "Last time I felt different. Let me do that again, deliberately, purposefully, and with full intention." That is not addiction in its origin. That is pure human intelligence. What we know with confidence is that the behavior is extraordinarily ancient. It predates agriculture. It predates pottery. It predates every known civilization entirely. By the time the historical record begins in every corner of Earth, humans were already finding sophisticated ways to put smoke into bodies. The plants changed across cultures. The rituals changed across centuries and regions. The purposes shifted from medicine to ceremony, to recreation to addiction. But the behavior itself, the behavior was already ancient beyond our reckoning, already ancient by the time anyone first thought to write it down. There is something quietly profound and almost poetic resting inside that fact. For all the things separating modern humans from our prehistoric ancestors now, the technology, the medicine, the cities, the internet, the endless content consumed, there are thin threads of continuity running unbroken across 100,000 human years. Fire, smoke, breath. The oldest humans sat around the same flames, breathing the same smoky air you smell at a bonfire tonight. Some of them, at some point, began paying attention to that smoke, began noticing what it did to the mind and the body. And then they began choosing it, and then passing that choice forward, to their children, and to their children, and to their children, always. All the way down through the Scythians howling with pleasure in tents, through Egyptian physicians prescribing henbane smoke for their suffering ancient patients, through Mayan shamans reading divine visions in the rising sacred smoke, through the Taino people watching confused Europeans cough through their first tobacco, all the way down through every ceremony, every ritual, every shared fire, all the way to right now, to you, reading these words tonight. The next time you sit beside a summer fire under open stars, and the smoke drifts toward you, and you lean instinctively away, remember that this moment connects you to something older than you imagine. You are doing exactly what humans have always done. You are breathing.